Good afternoon. This is a pleasure for me to be able to announce today the selection of Bill McLucas as the new division director for the Enforcement Division of the Securities and Exchange Commission. The enforcement program here at the Commission has an extraordinarily important tradition of maintaining the mandate of the Securities and Exchange Commission to protect investors all over this country. I know of no more important position in the American financial system in maintaining the integrity of our markets and protecting the vital confidence of investors to participate in American securities markets. The division has had a series of outstanding leaders, and I am convinced that Bill McLucas will carry out the traditions of excellence of the Commission and of the division in a most exemplary fashion. Bill's entire career, except for his first 2 years out of law school, has been with the Commission. He has been an associate director of the division since 1985. And he has been involved with and has helped to lead the Enforcement Division's efforts in some of the most important cases in recent years that we have handled. Those have included, most importantly, in the past few months, decisions that we have reached and actions we have brought against Mark Belzberg and First City Financial Corporation, the McMillan case, and others. The Belzberg case in and of itself represents an extremely important decision for the integrity of our disclosure program in connection with M&A contests, a decision that for the first time that we could obtain disgorgement in cases involving failure to file 13Ds as part of the M&A disclosure process. But whether it's that case, the Paul Bilzerian case, Boyd Jeffries, Rooney Pace, Ashland Oil, Bill's career has been built here at the Securities and Exchange Commission, prosecuting tough cases and doing so with creativity and leadership. I'm convinced that Bill possesses that combination of skills, management experience, the ability to instill confidence and morale in the staff, as well as legal acumen in bringing tough cases and pursuing them with dedication until a successful result can be obtained. In addition to his work here in Washington with the division, Bill had an experience that I think is an important one and will serve him well in his new capacity, and that was serving for approximately 4 months as director of the enforcement program in the New York regional office. He maintained his duties in the Washington office while he was doing that, proving his geographic and other versatility. But I think that experience with our regional program, where approximately 2/3 of our enforcement resources are located, will also serve him well in not only directing the effort here in Washington, but helping to bring a coordinated focus to our program throughout the country. And that, I think, will be very important. Bill has, I might add, has been the recipient of a Presidential Distinguished Rank Award and the Irving Pollock Award, which is awarded to enforcement lawyers here in the Commission. So throughout his career, he's shown not only a length of service, but extreme quality of service here at the SEC. I would also like to add that one of the things that was both most heartening and most difficult about the selection process was the extremely high caliber of the candidates for that position. It was extremely gratifying to me to be able to see the very, very fine quality of the applicants that we had for a position that I think many regard as one of the most important law enforcement positions in the country. Certainly, while we have concerns about the civil service requirements that are applicable to the staff here in the Commission and our ability to attract and retain over time personnel to meet the enormously demanding needs of the Commission, there was no apparent problem in the course of this selection process in attracting the very finest legal talent that would be available. And I would like to also add with some pride that in addition to a number of very outstanding candidates from the private sector, that we had 4 extraordinarily talented candidates, including ultimately Bill, but from here within the Commission for this position, and specifically Tom Newkirk and Joe Goldstein and John Stirk are each individuals who I think could serve as division director and could serve effectively and successfully as division director. So it was a difficult judgment to make, because we had not just one really good candidate, but we had a number of really good candidates. Having spent the time and effort to look very closely at the record and the writings and the other aspects of each of the candidates, though, I am very happy with my final selection. I'm confident that Bill will be a strong and successful leader of a terribly important part of the Commission's activities. I'd also like to, since I have the opportunity and have you captive here for a few minutes, to also announce one other development in our enforcement program. We have, at my direction, formed a new unit within the Enforcement Division which will be dedicated to the detection and prosecution of cases of financial fraud among financial institutions and their affiliates. We will initially focus on the sales practices, disclosure practices, and other activities of both banks and savings and loans in the sale of their securities and that of their affiliates to customers and other investors. One of the things that has become clear as a result of our ongoing investigation in the American Continental situation is that the sales practices and disclosure practices of financial institutions, particularly with respect to their customers, particularly where investors are dealing with an insured financial institution, is something that merits extraordinarily close attention on the part of the Commission, where we have jurisdiction and responsibility. And we intend to give every attention to maintaining the integrity of financial statements and financial disclosure documents by financial institutions as well as other issuers of securities. The new unit will have about 25 personnel at the outset. It represents a very substantial commitment of resources on the part of the Commission. I don't want to suggest that by creating this new unit that financial institutions are not doing a good job in their disclosure practices. I'm sure on the whole that most of these institutions have adhered to the rules regarding both disclosure at the time of an offering and periodic disclosure and sales practices. I don't want to create any implication to the contrary, but we have seen cases, particularly among failing firms, where there has been a particularly strong and urgent need to obtain additional resources, that some of those institutions may have gone beyond the line of permissible practices, and we intend to see to it that when individuals are sold securities, that they're provided the disclosures and the protections that are built in to our normal rules regarding sales practices. With that, I'd like to to stop and introduce Bill to you and let him have an opportunity to make a few remarks of his own. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am honored and, needless to say, delighted that I've been given the opportunity to be the director of the Division of Enforcement. I've been at the Commission and been in the Division for more than 12 years. I have worked for and with 3 of the 4 individuals who have served as director of the Division of Enforcement. I've learned a tremendous amount from every one of those individuals, and I'm extremely proud to say that I think I'm part of one of the best groups of professionals and one of the finest law enforcement organizations in the government. I view the chairman's decision to ask me to be the director of the Division of Enforcement as a vote of confidence by the chairman and the entire staff. And as we move into the 1990s, it is my intention, and I think that of everybody in the Division of Enforcement, to demonstrate that the confidence has been well placed and that we will do an outstanding job. Thank you very much.
We'd be happy to take any questions.
Bill, can you give us an idea of what your agenda might be in the next year or two? Are there any areas where you want to focus?
Well, I think you've heard some of them. I mean, certainly there is a concern in the area of financial institutions who offer and sell securities directly to investors out of their own offices. We have, I think, established a more than credible program in the insider trading area in connection with a whole string of cases that have come out of the Dennis Levine, Ivan Boesky cases. We intend, I believe, to focus quite heavily in the area of accounting, financial disclosure, financial fraud, and focus particularly on practices in the industry that get beyond the Boesky kind of conduct and go to the extent to which individual investors are harmed and the extent to which the integrity of the markets has been or is being affected by conduct of professionals in the business.
David.
Can you talk a little bit about your own career at the SEC in terms of what in your own view have been some of your own personal biggest accomplishments and how that may have helped you rise through the ranks?
Well, I don't know that there's any one case or any particular event. I mean, when I came here, Judge Sporkin was then the director of the division, and I think one of the reasons I came here and one of the reasons we still get a lot of people who are willing to make the financial sacrifice is that the agency and the division had a program, and it was a program that you could not simply believe in, that was credible. And over the years, it was the kind of program that kept you here because it was something that mattered and something that counted, and you felt like you were doing something with your profession. And fortunately for me, I either never got tired of it, and the financial issue was never significant enough that it made me ever want to do anything else. I wish there was one sparkling moment where I could say there was a particular incident, but I don't think there was. It's just basically the tradition of the place.
You know, one of the things that will be important and that was important to me in making this decision was recognizing that due to the action of Congress last year in the appropriations process and the strong recommendations in the FY91 budget, that we expect to see a significant enhancement of resources in the enforcement area, reflecting the President's determination to crack down on financial institution fraud of all types, and his determination that the American investor is entitled to the confidence that the government will do everything possible to maintain the security of our marketplace and protect against the types of abusive and fraudulent practices that we've seen. So we're expecting to see as many as 100 new enforcement lawyers here in Washington and others throughout the regions across the country over the next period of time while Bill will be building his record as and his organization as division director. And I think given the new challenges facing the division, it's particularly appropriate that we have a division director who for the last 12 years has been involved in all the major cases that the Commission has participated in, and who is very much a product of the Commission and of the enforcement program, and will be able to provide that continuity of knowing where this program has come from and its great historic strengths, but can also help lead it in new directions as we go forward.
Mr. McLucas, could you elaborate a little bit on what you meant about actions by professionals which harm the small investor and what you want to do about them?
Well, I wouldn't suggest that that a Boesky case or a Jeffries case was not fundamentally detrimental to the marketplace, to the integrity of the markets, and to the small investor. What I'm suggesting is that to the extent more run-of-the-mill conduct by brokerage firms, by individual brokers, we've brought a number of cases involving failure to supervise against branch managers in the few years. To the extent that there are problems in firms and problems both in the supervision and in the conduct by individual employees of firms, we're going to look at it, and we're going to make sure that to the extent we find problems, we're going to bring enforcement proceedings that are going to deal directly with the individuals. And that was more the point I was trying to make.
Can you be a little more specific on exactly what problems you're talking about when it comes to supervision and conduct? What exactly are they doing to the small investor that needs to be changed?
Well, I wouldn't suggest we prejudged it. However, to the extent we have churning, manipulation, things that you hear about nowadays more frequently in the penny stock area. But to the extent it's going on by professionals in any firm, where it's an abuse of a customer's trust and where it's the kind of conduct that affects the disposition of individual investors to get into the market. Those are the kinds of cases that we want to make sure we have an impact in that area, both in the area of failure to supervise and in dealing with the conduct by the individual registered representatives.
Suggest that you're not altogether happy with the self-regulatory organization approach to dealing with these issues?
No, it does not suggest that at all. I think if you look at what's happening in the SROs today, there is an incredible emphasis being put on enforcement. The New York Stock Exchange has devoted considerable resources over the past few years and has increased the number of people and the number of cases and the number of actions. I think what I'm suggesting is that it's important that people who don't play by the rules be sent a message that they may lose their ability to be a part of the industry. And that's something that I think it's important that the Commission focus on.
Yeah, it's worth noting the securities markets are relatively unique in financial regulation in the degree to which they have employed self-regulation as part of the overall supervisory system. And as Bill suggests, that has played an important role in the past, and we expect that it will continue to play an important role in the future. Whether it's the New York Stock Exchange, the NASD, all of the different self-regulatory organizations bring a substantial amount of resources to the overall effort of achieving compliance. But I think it's also important to maintain a balance. Remember that self-regulation is what it says, self-regulation, and it is appropriate for the United States government to exercise a meaningful level of oversight over the SROs and the result of that process. And we see that as a very cooperative effort in working with the SROs, but at the same time we are determined to see to it that practices in the investment community are kept at a level to avoid abuses of individual investors. And we think that's very important as one element of maintaining the confidence of individuals to participate in our markets. Now, hang on, let's get something on
that. This is an area that's a growing problem, or one that maybe has not received the attention that is due to it. And secondly, could we say that, would you say that this perhaps indicates that insider trading is not as rampant a problem as it had been earlier in the decade?
Well, insider trade, we would hope that insider trading is not as rampant a problem as it has been in the past. We've certainly managed to apprehend and take out of the business a number of the leading practitioners of the art. And I would like to think that that has a direct impact. I think no one would be under the impression today on Wall Street that insider trading is an acceptable practice, or that there isn't a material risk that the Commission would detect it and prosecute that activity. In fact, one of the things that I find very heartening about the success of the Commission in this area is that it has helped contribute to a spreading global determination to prevent insider trading. 10 years ago, even as recently as 5 years ago, the United States was relatively unique in the degree to which we considered insider trading to be a violation of the law. And in the intervening years, the countries around the world have increasingly moved toward defining insider trading as an illegal activity, and to bringing strong enforcement efforts to that effort in other markets as well. So I think we've had an impact both here in our own market in deterring some of that conduct, and in providing the leadership to the global community to seeing that we try and stamp out that type of activity. Nothing that we have said should be read as reducing the Commission's determination and commitment in that area. We will continue to look for cases of insider trading, and where we find them, we will use every one of our powers and authorities to deal with them. We would like to see some of the tools that we have in insider trading, some of the fining authority, for example, that we now have that's limited to the insider trading, broadened by Congress, so that we can bring the same level without diminishing the level of enforcement that we've had in that area, that we can try and spread those efforts to other very important areas of potential securities fraud as well.
And the other part of the question about,
Well, we'll come back if you, Patty.
Well, you said that the SEC will be able to have 100 new enforcement lawyers over the next period of time, but you don't have any more.
That's in Washington.
in Washington? Oh,
Yes, solely, and that's just in Washington. The
Okay.
program across the country, that's positions. I don't know whether all those would be legal positions.
But you don't have any more resources right now, so where are the 25 coming from for the, to go
No,
about
that's not true. We
financial?
do have a substantial, we received a substantial, our budget went from $142 million last year to $168.7 million, minus a touch for sequestration this year. So we received a substantial, more than 20% increase in our budget, and a substantial number of new positions in the FY90 budget, and a healthy fragment of those new resources are going to go into the enforcement program. That's the resources I'm talking about.
So do you have to take lawyers off of any of the other
Absolutely
types?
not. No, this is going to come, there will be not one iota of diminution in our other programs. You know, we'll be doing a lot of, now some of the people who will go into this new unit may have worked in other areas of the division. There are going to be some supervisory slots that would represent promotions, for example, to some of the other lawyers who may have worked elsewhere in the division. So I'm not going to say that there won't be some individuals who will go from one of the other units within the division to this new unit, but it doesn't represent any reduction in effort in any other area to staff up this new activity.
New unit already in place, or you going to put it in place by the beginning of the year? When?
Well, it is not up and running. We've commenced the staffing process already, and we would expect that at the beginning of the year that
Most things will go out in the next week.
you know, we're actively in the process of beginning the staffing of the division and have begun taking some activities that will be expanded as we go forward. Remember, of course, that the whole question of financial institution fraud, either in financial statements or security sales practices in other areas, is already within the jurisdiction of the Commission, and the Commission has had some efforts in that area in the past. So what we're going to try and do is to build on those efforts and expand them significantly. So we already have some people who are pursuing cases in that area and have in the past. It was the Commission that broke Financial Corporation of America back a couple of years ago, the largest savings and loan situation at that time. It was the Commission that has brought cases against Continental Illinois and many other large financial institutions. So we've got a long history in that area. I believe that we needed a dedicated resource unit to pursue these cases on a systematic basis rather than more episodically. So we're going to pull that.
Would it be up and running, do you expect?
Well, I've been trying to say that it is in a sense up and running already because some of this activity is ongoing. It will be up and running in a much bigger form in after the first of the year. I'd say a month from now we'll have been filling in many of the positions.
Concern that individual investors have left the market because of fraud and abuse, and that's why you want to put attention in this area to protecting the individual investor.
Well, we know that there has been a steady decrease in the percent of participation in the securities market as individuals. At the same time, there's been a steady increase in the participation in the market through institutions, whether they be mutual funds and pension plans and the like. Overall, the total number of direct or indirect shareholders is probably around 50 million Americans today, and that's probably higher than it's ever been before. So I don't want to suggest that we think that individuals have been driven out of the marketplace. They haven't. What we're very concerned about is to make sure that with all the publicity that has been given to both the 87 and 89 gyrations of the market, that individual investors understand that they can safely participate in the American securities markets. An investor who bought the Dow Jones Industrial Average stocks in January of 1987 and went through both the 87 market break and the 89 situation today would be up about 60% on his investment. That's a much higher return than would have been realized in other forms of investment products. So we think that investors, particularly those investors who are saving for their retirement or for their children's college education or to buy a home, but for long-run savings and long-term investment needs, we think that the securities market is a critical element in any investor's financial planning and financial future, and that they ought to have the confidence to know they can participate in that market without a danger of becoming victims of whether it's insider trading or penny stock fraud or the other types fraud and abuse that have occurred in the past.
We have time for one.
Can I ask Bill a question? Each of the, you talked about working for several of the division directors, almost all of them who've run the division. Each of them has had their own sort of style or approach that left an imprint on the division and on the agency. What, not so much in terms of changes, but in terms of your own approach to management and leadership and direction, what is it that you want to do? Where do you want to take the division, and what sort of approach and philosophy do you bring to that?
Well, I have the blessing of following in the footsteps of four people, Irv Pollack, Stan Spork, and John Fetters and Gary Lynch, who really, by any barometer, were outstanding lawyers, outstanding leaders, and really did a terrific job. I intend basically to continue to do what I do. I really don't have a program. I don't intend to change either how I approach the management decisions, the legal decisions, and I certainly will not attempt to outdo any of my predecessors on an individual basis. I mean, we've got a program, we've got several hundred people in the division. It's basically my good fortune, I think, to have been the beneficiary of a lot of hard work. None of the cases that have been referred to were cases that I did. They were all cases that a group of people that I was working with put together in an incredibly effective way. And in terms of management style and a personal stamp on the division, I really do not have a particular approach other than to continue to work with a lot of good people, and it's worked out well thus far, and I can basically assure you that my sense is that it will continue to work out well.
Thank you.
I think it's also it's important to recognize that, and I think it's any division director plays an important role in helping the Commission appreciate the choices that it faces in setting enforcement priorities. Ultimately, the enforcement program and the enforcement priorities are set by the Commission. That's what the President and the Senate put us here to do, and that's what we intend to do, is to make sure that we establish policies and priorities that are most appropriate for today's marketplace. So I think the division director's job is a critical one in helping to translate the policy, which is the policy of the Commission, into the actual day-to-day pursuit of cases, individual cases, that will translate that policy into the strongest possible reality in the marketplace. That involves a whole host of skills in terms of being able to recruit lawyers and other professionals into the division, to be able to train them so that, because in many cases the division is called upon to deal with the most sophisticated possible types of abuses, and it requires highly trained individuals to be able to deal effectively with those types of situations, to motivate the staff, to retain those personnel. It doesn't do us any good to hire the best professionals that we can find and to train them effectively if 18 months later they leave us for employment elsewhere. So we have to hire, train, and retain personnel so that we're able to successfully bring the cases that are necessary to get to the bottom line result of protection of investors out in the marketplace. And the division director is really a key part of making sure that that the division functions smoothly and effectively in carrying out the Commission's enforcement program. Thank you.
Thank you.